the game was different, right? The rules was different. The ball was different.
The Euro style is different in America.
The Euro style was a lot different than America.
That's the first time y'all seen that Euro step too, huh?
Absolutely.
All right, so today I have the honor and the pleasure to have Coach Maria Marchesano, who is the head coach of Mount St. Mary's. Coach, can you give us a little bit about you?
Yeah, for sure. So I kind of have a different story about how I got into coaching. You know, growing up, I never wanted to be a coach. And the main reason was I didn't want to have to decide playing time. I saw, you know, how stressful that could be. I saw that, you know, once I got to college, that every kid was expecting to be the superstar that they were in high school, and how difficult that was, making that adjustment. And that was something that I just didn't want to have to decide, as competitive as I was. But after college, I had the opportunity to go overseas and play in Italy for almost 5 years. And while I was there, they had asked a lot of us, people that could speak both languages, the foreigners, and especially me, because I could speak the language, to help coach some of the younger teams, the 15 under, 13 under, even 12, 11 under. And I kind of started liking it then. I saw that the satisfaction in helping kids grow. And then in between seasons, I was, you know, just waiting to go back overseas. I got a job at a small Division III university right outside of Fort Wayne, Indiana, where I'm from, Manchester College at the time. It's now Manchester University. And I helped with softball and basketball there, as well as did a number of other things. And I really fell in love with just being on a college campus, being around, you know, 18 to 22-year-old kids. I saw that there was so much more to coaching than just deciding playing time. And I kind of fell in love with it at that point. And from there, I was given an opportunity right away to become a head coach at the D2 level, kind of in a crazy situation. The coach was fired mid-season, and they brought me on right after Christmas to start coaching the team at the Division II level, no less, which is a pretty, you know, good level of basketball here in the States. And so from there, I knew at that point that coaching was what I wanted to do and where I wanted to be, and I wanted to continue to move up that ladder, and jumped from Urbana to Walsh University, another Division II in Ohio. From there, I wanted to get back to Division I, and that's what I had played. I played at Butler, and I wanted to get back to that high level. And really, the only void on my resume was coaching at the Division I level. I had played it, but I hadn't coached it. So I took an associate head coach job at IUPUI, which is in Indiana.
Okay, yeah. I know.
And had a great year there. And I was only there 1 year before I came out here to be the head coach at the Mount. So I've had a little bit of a different path, but, you know, very blessed along the way. I've learned from a lot of great coaches, whether it be who I played for, who I played for overseas, or who I've coached with. And, you know, I just want to keep growing.
Okay, marvelous. As you said, you was in Butler. I'm assuming you was there with when Brad Stevens was there?
So he was actually director of basketball operations at the time. So that's how long ago I was there. So he was kind of bottom of the totem pole at that time. Obviously, we all know he worked his way up. But yeah, he was definitely there. Awesome person. So nice. Just really down to earth.
Nice. Okay, nice. And is that where you met Coach Betko, Julian Betko?
Yep, he was at, I think he transferred in maybe my sophomore or junior year. And that's when he came in. I think he came in from Clemson, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
Yep.
Okay. Good guy, despite all the rumors. No,
yeah, he had his fair share of injuries along the way, but yeah, he's an awesome dude.
Yeah, that's my guy, man, my brother. Right, so getting straight into it. I know we spoke briefly, and you know, you said you've only got, you know, 2 international kids, or 2 international players, should I say. What's the biggest difference you have having those international kids compared to the domestic players in your program?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, you know, we've recruited a number of international kids, and these 2 happen to be the first 2 I've had in my program. One thing I've noticed from them is they love training. They love training. They love doing, you know, all aspects of getting better at the game. I think, you know, international kids have a reputation of being offensive minded. And I do see some of that, definitely. They definitely are more skilled. not necessarily than individuals in our program, but just as a whole, they're more skilled on the fundamentals of the game. I think, as you've probably seen here in the U.S., there's so much emphasis on the glamour and the flash of the game that, there's a lot of fundamentals lost in the process. AAU, these kids are playing a million games a summer, but not necessarily developing their game. And I think that's one thing that the international kids, they don't lose out on that. They really focus on that. They focus on the training. They enjoy the process, and they love the grind. They love all of it.
Very, very, very true. And getting to see both worlds now more and more. There is a big emphasis on physical attributes here in the States. The higher premium, the tallest kid in the gym, the biggest, strongest, blah, blah, blah. Whereas Europe, not saying that we don't have those athletes, but everyone's pretty much the same. There's no real big standout. So everyone's got to be your skills, your footwork, your shooting, your IQ has got to be a lot higher than everyone else to kind of maneuver and play the game. So definitely something that I've noticed as well. I guess in that same vein, is there a reason, if you had a domestic kid and you had an international kid of the same sort of caliber, why would you choose, or would you choose the international over the domestic?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough question. I think for us, the recruiting process is very different for every kid, no matter whether they're international or domestic. But for us, we're looking for a very specific type of player in terms of, one that fits our system, which all coaches are. But at that point, it's then becoming comfortable with the person. And with international kids, you have to worry, are they mature enough to live away from their families? Are they going to get homesick? Do they come from a country where the culture is really going to be a shock once they get here? And vice versa, like I said, you being in the States, when it's a domestic kid, you have the influence of the parents, you have the influence of the AAU coaches, the high school coaches, and sometimes that's a huge downfall. We bring kids here and we're doing the best we can to develop them and make them into the best basketball players, students, and people that they could possibly be. All the while, when they're a domestic kid, they're probably hearing 100 different opinions, a day, what they should be doing or what they shouldn't be doing. And so sometimes there's a benefit to that international kid where you kind of have a more isolated relationship with them, and you can build that trust, and they're not being influenced by as many people on a daily basis. So there's pros and cons to both sides of it. Like I said, we've recruited a number of other international kids that, unfortunately we weren't able to get. So I don't have a ton of experience of, having coached those kids once they get here. But so far, the two that we've had, and unfortunately they didn't make it back this year because of the pandemic. But the two that we've had, it's been awesome, getting to know them and seeing kind of the joy that they have with the game.
Yeah, I hear that. Speaking about, you said you've tried to get a lot of those, a few international players. What's the process of recruiting an international player from start to finish?
Yeah, like I said, it's very different for each kid. Probably 5 years ago, I would have said a nice email would catch my attention, but this day, 100 emails a day, so it's tough. Anymore. An email can maybe start the conversation, but it's going to help if you have somebody in the States that can connect on a one-on-one level with coaches. I know. Eventually with the two that we had somebody that reached out that knew one of our staff members, and there's kind of that element of trust that they might know what they're talking about. So, it's a different process. I'm at a small private Division I, and we don't have a huge recruiting budget. So to fly those kids over is not always a possibility. The two that we have now, thankfully, they were able to come over on their own. So it just depends, and with the pandemic, everyone's virtual. Even domestic kids aren't allowed to have visits right now. But even, like I said, even with our universities in Maryland, every kid we recruit in Maryland, that process can look very different based on at what point in their recruiting process we start recruiting them, if they're young, if they're old, if they are transferring. So it's a very different process for each kid. And with the international kids, it's an even more difficult process to kind of earn that trust of the potential coach.
Okay, so let's say I've got a player in England. She is 17, just about to, graduate her college, I guess, equivalent, high school equivalent. I think she's good enough to play D1. I send you an email. I send you some video. What happens then? What happens next?
For my staff personally, if you send it to me, the first thing I'm going to do is send it to my recruiting coordinator, and she's probably going to let me know right off the bat, is this a position we need in this class? If I have time on that particular day, I'll watch the video before sending it on to see if it's worth her time. But then once I send it on, and she might say, hey, coach, remember, we've already offered 2 kids at that position in that class, or whatever it may be. And then if there's a mutual interest between myself from clicking on that link, or maybe my recruiting coordinator saying, yeah, we need that position, then we're going to send it to the rest of our staff, have them watch some of that film. And then it also depends on what's in that email. Is it just a highlight film? If so, we're going to have to get game film. Academic qualifications, we're going to have to start doing our research on that. What kind of experience with basketball do they have? Is the one of the things that we struggle with film from international kids is how is the competition they're playing against? It's a very very difficult to kind of decipher via just film. So that is one thing that always makes us nervous. Once we get that highlight film, it catches our eye, and then we get that game film, and maybe we still love her, but we're like, how good are those girls she's playing against? So it's especially with an international kid, it's an in-depth process of kind of watching a lot of film, seeing if we have any contacts to this kid, seeing if we have any connections or other ways that we can kind of verify the talent and the size. Everyone loves to,
give a few more inches.
6 foot kid, then they get here and you're taller than them, and I'm 5'9", 5'10". So it's a unique process. It's definitely not bulletproof. Recruiting in general is a crapshoot. You honestly don't know what you're going to get. I think every single year that I've been a coach and had multiple kids in one class, I've always said, okay, we think this kid is going to excel. And it's always somebody else in that class that ends up excelling, and it's not necessarily based on skill. It's a lot of times the most skilled kids, it has nothing to do with that as a freshman. The ones that play and have an impact as a freshman are the ones that adjust to the pace and physicality of the game right away. So, and that's another thing with international kids, I've found it's one or the other. They're either very physical and very used to that play, or they're not used to it at all. So I know I was in for a rude awakening. When I went over there, I played Division I college basketball, and I had always heard that, European basketball was all offense, all finesse. And my first practice there, and my first, A1 league games in Italy, man, those are physical games. You
got beat up.
Very, yeah, I mean, it's like the kind of fouls that we get over here, especially with the new handshake rules. That stuff is, it's crazy over there. So that's something that you just never know how those kids are going to adjust, whether they're skilled or not. So recruiting is something that you got to say a lot of prayers about, and hope that the kids that you take a risk on end up working out for you. Fair
enough. I like it. And you've already mentioned it, so we don't have to stay here long, but how valuable is highlight tape? How much credence does it have on you, really going after a player?
Well, I think it's important because, like I mentioned, with all the emails that we get and all the coaches that call us, we can't sit down and watch every single game film that comes through. But if you send us that highlight film and we see that you have right off the bat some skills that make sense in our systems, then we can move on to the game film. We're not going to just offer a kid based off highlight film, no way, because anyone can look good on a highlight film. But I do think there's value in grabbing a coach's attention or just giving a coach a preview of what you bring to the table. So I do think there's a lot of value in them. It just can't be the only piece, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely. I got you. What would be the best way and again, I guess you kind of touched on this as well, but what would be the best way for an overseas player to get your attention, or to get a college coach's attention in general?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the email is the easiest way to kind of get in contact with them. But like I said, a lot of those get lost in the shuffle. A lot of them go to my junk or spam folders because we get so many of them. I think the best way, if you're really truly, intent on a specific school or a specific program, is to try and get somebody to reach out to that coach or that program on your behalf, because a one-on-one conversation is going to hold that coach accountable. It's going to hold that staff, accountable to take a look at your film and give you a response, whether they're interested or not. And I know that's not always the easiest thing, but I do think at this day and age, with so many emails that we get, I mean, they're hitting us up in our Twitter DMs, our Instagram DMs, they're sending film, they're emailing us. It's overload. It's on overload all the time. So I think if you can get that one-on-one personal attention of a coach via a phone call, it's going to go a long way.
I've got there's a question that I've got for you at the end, and it's going to be very interesting to hear how but we'll circle back. We don't want to get to it. I don't want to jump ahead. Okay, so what should a freshman just entering a college, what should they expect?
I think your first semester of your freshman year is very overwhelming. It's more about, time management than anything. Your first semester, when you get here, you're not in your in-season right away. You're 8-hour preseason. And so the overall time consumption is less. But for us specifically in the preseason, you're going to have a lot more smaller appointments, for lack of a better word. So you might have, a 6 a.m. track workout, and then you might personally have 8, 9, and 10 a.m. class. And then maybe you got to get treatment, and then you have your on-court 30-minute individual workout that afternoon. And that's going to be very different than somebody else on your team. Their individual workout might be on Tuesday afternoon, along with weights and whatnot. So I think your first semester as a freshman is very overwhelming. Once we get into season, it's a lot more time consuming, but it's a lot more, you're on the same schedule as your teammates. You're practicing 2 to 3 hours every afternoon. You kind of you get into that routine of that schedule. But I would just, expect to be, to roll with the punches, because as a freshman, you're going to hit some adversity. It's going to be tough. You might get homesick. The schooling, the academic aspect might be tough. You're trying to connect with your new teammates. You're trying to connect with your new coaches, your new surroundings. It can be tough as a freshman, but just have an open mind, roll with the punches, try and get better every single day, and don't stress too much if you have a bad day, because you're going to have those, whether it's, you weren't really ready for conditioning, as you thought you trained really hard all summer, but you hit that track and you're struggling. You're one of the last ones every single time. Don't let it bring you down. Just realize that this is your freshman year. You didn't know any better, and just keep working your hardest every single day.
I like that, especially, I'm sure domestic, international, whatever, kids go in with a sort of ideology of where they think they are, not understanding the level they're going to. So, if they at high school or, college, the equivalent, and they've just had, they finished up their season, it was good. They know they're going to college now. They get into the weight room a little bit, not lifting like a collegiate athlete. Right. They run around the track a couple times, and then they get there and they're like, oh, okay, I'm at the back. Oh, okay. It's trying to, I see a lot of athletes who are like, man, am I cut out for this? I just sent one of the kids, one of my players here, just left the high school, and we transferred him to a junior college, and he was dominant down here with the guys that we had, and it was pretty good, and went at his own pace, and now he's in junior college, and he's like, coach, this is tough, man. It's hard. So the adjustment period is can be pretty rough. What's your views on junior college versus prep schools versus academies? Where would you prefer to recruit the players from?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't have a lot of experience with recruiting from any of those. Since I've been out in Maryland, there's a ton of prep schools and academies out here, so I've gotten a little bit more experience of recruiting kids from there. JUCOs, we have considered and offered a few. It's the same thing where, you know, we might not have gotten those kids. But I don't have biases towards any of them. I do think the landscape of recruiting is getting ready to change with the NCAA eventually passing the waiver where you don't have to sit out. And I think, you know, as those JUCO prep kids, academy kids, I think you have to be a lot more willing to accept what offers are on the table versus being picky, because from now on, coaches are going to be looking at those kids that already have D1 experience in that transfer portal. And there's going to be close to 1,000 or more kids in there every single year, which is insane.
Yeah.
But I do think there's value in all of those. You know, with JUCO, you got to understand, why were they at JUCO? Were they not developed yet? Was it an academic reason? Obviously, it's still a higher level than high school. So grabbing that kid from JUCO, they're going to be a little bit more prepared for the pace and physicality than just a normal high school kid. And the same with the prep. You know, it's a little step up from high school, and the academies where it's a little bit more college focused. So I definitely think there's value in all those. I don't have, like I said, a ton of experience recruiting from those venues specifically, but I do think they have a lot of value.
Is there any one of those institutions that you prefer over the other, or are they pretty much the same? So if I'm a college, a high school kid, and I'm 18 and I'm like, I'm not quite ready to go to college yet, or I've been offered a lower level school than I think everyone thinks they should be at, UConn women's team, so they're like, UConn hasn't offered me yet, I'm going to go to a junior college to get better, or a prep school. Like, what would you decide over the other if you could?
I mean, I think every single case is just based on that specific individual. With prep, obviously you don't lose college eligibility. With JUCO, you're losing years of college, you're not losing it. You're getting that experience. But if you go prep, you have 4 years of college basketball left. Versus if you go JUCO, you're losing a year. Not losing it, but it's not going to be at that level that you're hoping to get to. So I think every kid is just an individual case. I mean, I think if it's a kid where they just their bodies haven't developed, or maybe they're not comfortable with the growth, and maybe they're just not as coordinated as they will be once they get comfortable, I think prep is a great option. If it's an academic case, I think prep or JUCO is a good option. If it's a basketball specific case where you're trying to prove your worth, you feel like you've already developed, you feel like you're basically a baller and you're not getting the love that you deserve, then I think JUCO is a really good route, because a lot of those bigger schools are gonna look at those games and see who's putting up stats and carrying their JUCO teams. And obviously you see JUCO kids on Power 5 rosters all the time, so there's obviously a need for that, and coaches definitely take advantage of it.
Nice. I like that answer. I know in Europe in general, and I always do mention this, but a lot of parents and players turn their nose up at JUCO. They don't think it's, they look at themselves as a disappointment because they're going to junior or having to go through the JUCO route, which, I think there is a function of it. And I do think, as you said, there are success stories out of junior college. So yeah, I'm all for it. How hard or how easy is it for your two international players to integrate into the system? Was it very difficult for them to, Australia is literally the other side of the world. So how is it to integrate them into the college fabric?
From the academic standpoint, those kids are both very, very smart. They integrated very easily. They both get really, really good high marks in their classes, and they're both easy to get along with. They're great kids. From a basketball standpoint, it took them a while to kind of adjust to the game. If you talk to them, they'll tell you the game is very different from here to there. I feel like we run an offense where our kids are given a lot of freedom in comparison to a lot of other colleges here and who we play against, but they felt like it was still a lot less freedom than they had, excuse me, in Australia.
Yeah.
So, I feel like, we run a lot of dribble drive stuff. We run a lot of Princeton reads, and there's freedom within that. You can play basketball, and our kids love it because they've come from programs where they had 17 just plays. They had plays, they didn't have offenses. And so I feel like we have a very free offense. But even they felt like it's a lot more freer in Australia, and they feel like the game in general, we play fast here at the Mount, but they feel like the game in general is very much more fast in Australia. So they definitely have had their their struggles with adjusting to, and defensively as well. We do a lot of different things here, and that was an adjustment, to obviously, in the States, when you come here, you can't play if you can't defend, especially at the college level. So they've had their bumps, but, if they were here this year, I know they would have been, had made strides from last year and grown and probably be contributing at this point.
Yeah. It is different. And it's funny that you said that on our first season, a lot of the players speak about, how regimented the style of play is, especially offensively, and they don't have the level of freedom. So it made me smile when you say that. Specifically, we had a female player who plays for GB, and she's on the national team now. And she said when she went to the University of Pennsylvania, she found it hard to adjust. She was, back home in England, she's a combo guard. And, at Pennsylvania, it was like, no, you're a 2. You don't dribble the ball, give the ball up, kind of, you run down this lane every time. So, it is a bit challenging sometimes for the international crew to come over and play that regimented style. But I like that. What is typically covered in a full scholarship at D1 level? And do you do half scholarships, and is it different to D2? Can you tell us about that?
And typically at the Division I level, it's going to cover everything from room, board, fees, books. The only thing that, for example, here, the only thing you would have to pay for is your parking pass and your housing deposit. So if you are lucky enough to have a car, $50 parking pass or whatever it is, and then the housing deposit is just to make sure that you don't damage your apartment or your room. And if you don't, you get that money back. So generally speaking, a Division I scholarship is going to cover literally everything you need. And depending on what level of college you're at, you might even get money in your pocket. They call it cost of tuition, where they're able to give you money back based on whatever the cost is at their school, and usually it even gives you extra spending money. So at the Division I level, everything is always going to be taken care of. Division II, Division III, obviously Division III, you can't have athletic scholarships. Division II, they can split it up. They can do a full ride. They can cover books. They can cover maybe just, your tuition. There's a lot of things you can do at the Division II level. And I suppose you could probably do that at Division I level as well, but we're a head count sport. So if you give one kid $1, that counts as a full scholarship. So you might as well give it all to them. That's how it works at the Division I. So there's definitely benefits, in terms of financial, when it comes to Division I versus Division II, III. I'm not very familiar with how it works at NAIA, but I know that they are able to give some pretty good packages.
Yeah. Nice. And when you offer a scholarship, is that for the duration, is it a 4-year contract, so to speak, or is it like renewable every year, or do you have to renew it every year?
Yeah, so it's renewable every year. In my case, I'm not going to take the scholarship away just for nothing. It's usually gonna only be taken away if there's, conduct detrimental to the program. If you have an injury, you're always going to be taken care of, in terms of insurance and your scholarship. You're not going to have medical bills that whatever your insurance doesn't cover, the school covers, the rest of it.
Good.
And then if you had a career-ending injury, they're going to exempt your scholarship, and the rest of your schooling would be paid for in most situations as well. So definitely going to be taken.
Okay, I like that. And you said you wouldn't take it away unless it's detrimental. So, you know, you have a player that is like a negative 20 in your plus minus rating. You know, they average a solid 4 turnovers a game anytime you put them in. Would you take away a scholarship from that player? Great kids, great academic.
Generally speaking, no, I'm not gonna take a scholarship away from a kid just because they turned out to be not good enough at basketball. But I will have a conversation with them. And in that case, they usually decide to transfer. And those are tough conversations to have, but it goes back to that playing time conversation that I had about, you know, when I didn't want to be a coach. I want kids to have a good experience. And if there's truly no opportunity moving forward for that kid to earn playing time because they're probably just not going to get there in terms of their skill and their pace and all that stuff, then I will have that tough conversation. But 95% of the time, we're still not going to take it away if they want to remain in the program. As long as they're a good kid, a good teammate, they're taking care of business in the classroom. You know, we have 15 scholarships, so it's not like, and I only usually play 8 or 9 kids a game, if that. So there's always going to be kids on the end of the bench who aren't going to get a ton of playing time. And if they're good culture kids and they're contributed to the team in other ways, then they're going to keep their scholarship.
Nice. I like that. I like that. It's good. I think sometimes, I think players are concerned that that goes towards the performance anxiety, right? So, you know, you have a couple of bad games and now instantly you take a shot, you're looking over at coach to see if, you know, coach is going to take you out, or, you know, turnover, and you're kind of getting ready to walk over to the bed, and like it kind of makes it worse. You know, your schoolwork goes bad and grades and, you know, other personal relationships. So being secure in a program, knowing that you're wanted, and, you know, the coach is about your overall success, not just on the court, I think pays dividends, and is a very important factor when players are choosing programs.
Yeah, I mean, our business is all about relationships. So making sure that everyone knows they're part of the program, that their role is important, whether they play minutes or not. Obviously, you're always going to have that performance anxiety because, like I said, everyone wants to earn minutes and play, you know, 35 minutes a game. That's what everyone wants. So it's kind of hard to get around that completely, but you know, scholarship, whether their scholarship depends on every single shot. Our kids in our program probably aren't ever going to feel that pressure.
Nice. Okay. You spoke about playing time and stuff like that, so I don't think we need to cover it, but, you know, just to double down on it, I guess, yourself in particular, you know, you play the kids that are in the position to succeed rather than just play, like, you know, you kind of hand it out as on a earned merit basis, and making sure that they're comfortable out on the floor as well as productive out on the floor as well for the program.
And yeah, for us, if we don't have any walk-ons this year, but if we did, it doesn't even matter about scholarship or what you did the year before. It's really just about who's producing at the time and who's, you know, generating results. It's kind of like, you know, in school you have those kids who study all the time, and then they barely get that B plus or even that B or B minus. And then there's those kids that, you know, it doesn't really matter. They don't study. They still get a good grade. They get that A or that A plus. And it's kind of the same with basketball. You know, you want kids to be hard workers and you want them to, you know, work at their craft extremely hard and be passionate about it. But at the end of the day, there's some kids who maybe don't practice as hard or play as much, but they produce. And at the end of the day, as coaches, you know, our main job is to have wins, you know, to get wins. So it's about results. And so obviously we would love to play the 5 hardest workers in our program, you know, 35 minutes a game, but it comes down to who's producing out there. So for us, it doesn't matter if you're the 15th man or the first man, or if you're a senior, if you're a freshman. If you're getting it done on the floor, then you're probably going to get opportunities to play. And you know, that's just kind of how we've always coached.
Okay, I like it. So coach, switching gears a little bit, what does a typical college day consist of for you guys?
It depends on the time of year that it is. Like I mentioned before, when they first get to college, that preseason, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we do track workouts, starting to get that build up that conditioning and that endurance. And then they'll probably have 2 or 3 morning classes, maybe lunch. And then in the afternoon, they might have their individual workout with 2 coaches, with maybe 1 or 2 players that are of similar skills, where they're getting put through a workout that just works on fundamentals. And then that night they might have open gym where they can just play pickup, or they might have, who knows, a tutoring session. They might have to get their study table hours in. And then on Tuesday, they might have nothing for basketball, or they might only have their weights, or they might only have study tables. So in the preseason, it's a very different for each individual kid. But once we get into season, the weeks are very similar. They're going to lift twice a week as a team in the morning, and then we practice and do film pretty much every afternoon from about 3 to 6-ish. I'm not big on spending more than 2 hours on the court, but between, warm-ups and then watching film and stretching and doing all that stuff, our actual practice time is usually right around hour and 40 minutes, hour and 45, maybe a little longer in the beginning of the season and a lot shorter towards the end of the season. And then that night they're going to grab dinner, and then they're going to study or get their study tables done. So, like I said, we have an app on our phone that we pay a lot for these kids, that helps them remind them of all their appointments, and it's very specific to them. It's going to remind them if they have class, if they have training table, if they have study hall, if they have a tutor session, if they have their extra shooting with the coach, and it helps them. But like I said, after that first semester of freshman year, I think you really start to get time management down, and it starts to flow, and you get into your own routine. And our kids actually prefer when they're in classes. So we just finished a very long winter break because of the pandemic. We ended classes earlier. We started late. We were off for almost 2.5 months. And our kids get bored. They're just laying around the dorm. There's only so much extra shooting you can do, extra lifting, extra conditioning, extra film. And so when they have that routine of classes, I think we have a much more productive practices. We're better in games. We're more locked in. It's weird that it works that way, but our kids just do better when they're in classes.
Yeah, and I guess it kind of, especially at this age in their lives, you want a little bit of variety, right? You don't want to just be doing the same mundane thing day in and day out, no matter how much you love it, but just, oh man, I'm going to go and stimulate my mind. Now I'm going to go stimulate my body. Now I'm going to go, get my behind chewed out by coach. You know what I mean? Like, there's different processes in the day that, they kind of yearn for. What type of playing statuses are there in terms of red and gray and medical red shirt?
So the only ones, I'm familiar with, you mentioned it in your email, is red shirt. I've never heard of it. I've heard of it, but I don't really know what the gray shirt term means. But for us, the red shirt is going to be if it's an injury or an academic issue, or and it's more used on the men's side than the women's side, although it is used on the women's side as well, but just for either an underdeveloped kid, or maybe a kid that is coming in and is good, but the person ahead of them is like really good, and they're just not going to get very many minutes. And so maybe you decide to redshirt them, develop them even more, then that kid graduates and they're even more ready to step on the court. So the red shirts are used for a number of reasons. I do feel like they're used a lot more on the men's side than the women's side, but it's definitely something to be familiar with. I know I've had a lot of conversations here recently with kids because of the pandemic and how they have granted this to be a free year. Roster sizes are going to be very large next year.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be some freshmen that consider redshirting just because they don't want to spend their freshman year on the bench just because a senior is now playing their 6th or 7th year in college, So, and we're going to have that. We have a kid that was already granted a 6th year because of injuries. She'll just be playing her 5th year next year, and she will still have 2 more years left because of the pandemic. We have a 6-year kid, 2 5th-year kids right now that would be playing their 6 years of college basketball next year. So there's definitely reason to talk about it in the next couple of years with these roster sizes.
So I'm confused. What are they studying in year 7? Are they is that PhD now, or is that...
Yeah, whether it's a second master's or starting on their doctorate, I don't even know if you can do that in play. But yeah, no, we have probably 2 kids right now working on their masters, and next year we would have a lot of kids working on their master's degree, which is awesome for them.
Wow, that's that's interesting. Okay. Speaking of which, how important are academics to the success of a student athlete? And is there more importance on international kids, would you say, or international player, to have better academics?
Well, obviously academics are extremely important. That's their first priority here. In terms of, is there a higher importance for the international kid? I think there's maybe a slightly higher importance, because you want to make sure that there's already going to be all those adjustments that the kid has to go through based on culture and moving and all that stuff. So you want them to be academically sound so that they don't have that worry once they get here. But I think that's a worry for any kid, not just to international kids. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of our first boxes that we have to check off. Are they going to be academically eligible? Are they going to struggle at this level with the academics? And obviously, that's not going to completely deter us from recruiting them, but it's definitely information that we'd like to find out ahead of time.
Okay, good. Again, let's just say a player comes in, they're eligible, decent grades, and then, everyone's away from home, party life, girls, guys, whatever, and everyone's like lost their mind, so to speak, and their GPA goes down. Can a player still, can a student still play or practice, even though they're great, their GPA is now dropped below standards?
I think it depends on the situation. A lot of times, no, they cannot. It depends. Like if they become academically ineligible, then they can't. But if they're still on scholarship, then generally speaking, they can still practice. But if a kid comes into school and they're completely ineligible, they don't have their core classes, and then they're unable to even receive scholarship, then they're not allowed to play or practice with the team. I'm really bad with that stuff. I always have to double check with our compliance officer. But yeah, it depends on the situation. It depends on the kid. It depends on, how far they are along in their major. Is it just a bad semester, or is there a cumulative GPA drop so low that now that they're ineligible? So there's a lot of factors that go into that.
Okay, interesting. Coach, this has been amazing. We got a few more, but really enjoying this talk with you. Right. So what are some of the basic life fundamentals that these new students should be coming into college with?
So obviously, when you get to college, you're in large part on your own. Obviously, when you play a sport such as basketball, you come in with an automatic support group. But to some extent, you want kids that have learned how to be independent, have learned, it would worry me if we were bringing a kid in who's never done laundry, never done dishes, never had any chores around the house. Those kids find it really hard to adjust. I think being able to deal with adversity is a good trait to have. You're going to hit adversity in college. Being self-motivated is a huge one, because again, you have so much free time in college. What are you going to do with it? Are you going to party? Are you going to nap? Or are you going to study extra, get extra shots up? And obviously we want our kids to be balanced. We want them to have fun as well. We want them to hang out and socialize, which has been difficult this year because with the pandemic, they really haven't been able to. So that release has not been there for them. We want them to be balanced, but a kid that's self-motivated to get things done, a kid that is able to stand up for themselves, whether it be on, social injustice issues or just on the court, to say, I got this, or, you see that a lot in early pickup games. You see, can kids stand up for themselves? Can they fight? Can they battle? Can they stand up to their older teammates? And it's always a huge tell to see, what kind of kid they are. But obviously, we get kids from all over the spectrum, whether it be poor, rich, all different, sexualities, all ethnicities. And that's an awesome thing about it, because our kids learn so much in 4 years of being around people that are just different than them. So I just think having an open mind is another good trait, because you're going to be away from everything that you know when you come to college, and you're going to go through different experiences. And having an open mind and having a kind heart are two things that we definitely look for in kids.
Nice, yeah, definitely. There has to be a huge level of independence and being able to be self-motivated for you to be successful, I think, on any level. So yeah, coming into college is definitely big. You mentioned seeing some of those attributes, standing up for themselves and stuff in open gym and pickup games. Do you watch many of those? Do you ever just sit in the bleachers or the balcony or whatever and just watch them interact and play?
Well, a lot of that stuff you see through watching them in AAU, especially with the
okay.
Yeah. With pickup, it depends on if it falls under our 8 hours, if we use part of our 8 hours, to allow them to play, or if it's on their own time. If it's on their own time, we generally don't watch. But if we have 8 hours and 4 of them can be on the court, and we might save 45 minutes for them to play as a part of their 4-hour court time, and yeah, we'll watch and kind of let them do their own things, make their own rules with pickup, and see what kind of rules they select, because obviously there's a bunch of different things you can do with pickup. Are they going to decide to play to 5, to 7, to 9, to 12, to 11? Are they going to go by 1s and 2s? Do they have a free throw to end it? Are they calling their own fouls? That's a big one. Are they soft? Are they going to say, we're calling our own fouls because, they want every call? And, so there's a lot of little things that you can pick up on, see how they interact with their teammates when the coaches aren't around. You learn a lot about your team just observing.
That's interesting. And just slightly on topic, off topic, can you not watch them if it's outside of your 8 hours? Can you not watch the group?
We're not supposed to. Yeah, because then, they could feel like if we're watching that was a mandatory pickup session, or that was a mandatory, or we're being evaluated, or they could feel like they're being evaluated, or so yeah. If it's outside of our 8 hours or our 20 hours when we're in season, then we're not supposed to watch.
Oh, that's interesting. Coach, what type of relationship do coaches have with parents generally? So let's say Jane's mum wants to call you because she doesn't think Jane's eating, or she wants to know if she's had her washing done. What kind of relationship do you normally have with parents?
Yeah, obviously we build that relationship in the recruiting process. I think I probably deal with parents a lot more than a lot of coaches do. I'm always open for them to call me, especially when it's concerning the well-being of their child. There are HIPAA laws that don't allow us to talk to their kid about academics and certain things, but if it's about their health or anything that's not related to playing time, I'm going to talk to the parents. I'm not going to talk to parents about playing time because I have myself and 4 other staff members that help me decide that. And this is something that we've studied our whole life. And I think, we're with them every single day. So I think we have a better grasp on that than they do. But, when it comes to, eating disorders or their mental health or even just their living situation or anything, I'm always willing to talk to parents, and I'll listen to parents honestly with anything they have to say. There's certain things I'm not going to discuss with them.
Okay, so a parent can tell you they're unhappy with their child's playing time, but you're not going to discuss it with them.
Well, usually what I'll do if that, and it hasn't happened very often, but I always invite them to come watch practice. I have a very open policy, and I think that, when they come watch practice, it's a very eye-opening experience to see this is probably why your kid isn't playing as much. And sometimes it's a tough conversation, and there are times when a kid is doing really well at practice and they're still not going to play a lot just because there's somebody that's in their position that's just better or more experienced or whatever it may be. So it's not always black and white. And some people, it's hard for them to see that, but there's a lot of gray area with this stuff. But I always offer them to come watch practice and try and get the view that we're getting on a daily basis. And of course, on that day, the kid always goes super hard. It's always different look, but it hasn't happened very often. I think that, I try and be very upfront with kids in the recruiting process that that's not something we're going to discuss with parents.
The day the parent comes in is the day they want to be a all-star. It makes you out to be a liar. And coach, you know this from experience, man. We get players that are great in the practice gym. We get players that, there's no fans, there's no officials. You're comfortable with your teammates. So, even sometimes players being chippy a little bit, they're okay to go at their teammate or someone on the first squad or whatever, versus someone else from a different school that they don't know and they're tentative at. So, even players in practice sometimes that, it's players that are really good in practice doesn't necessarily translate to games because, of those factors. So, I think parents who aren't around their child 24/7 to see the different changes in their behaviors psychologically, mentally, whatever.
Yeah, and vice versa. We have kids that aren't very good at practice that just when the lights come on, they're really good in games. And that's a tough one to sell as well, because a kid that's out playing them in practice every day, and then they don't get as much playing time as this other kid. And some kids just, the lights go on, they're a different player. So like I said, there's a lot of gray area in these decisions. And sometimes all it comes down to is just your gut. And that's a tough thing to explain to a parent. But like you said, we're around them 24/7. We see how they are in different environments. We see how they react. And sometimes it just comes down to what feels best for us right now.
Isn't that the most frustrating thing when you have a really talented, it's probably like the thing that I hate the most as a coach, when you have a really talented player, like really talented player, and they're like sleepwalking through practice and you're like, I want to strangle you right now, because if you just applied yourself more, you'd be something amazing. Oh man. Yeah.
It's definitely frustrating. And there are kids too, and this is something that, we struggled with one of our foreigners, was some kids are working hard, but it doesn't look like they're working hard. They go at this hard pace, and no matter how much you yell or push them, they really can't push themselves any further. And so that's frustrating as well, because you have those kids that visually show how tired they are and how hard they're working. And some of that is just the other kids are more mentally tough and they're able to not show it. So it's all those things that you kind of have to figure out about each kid and what buttons you can push and how far you can push them outside of their comfort zone to make them better.
Definitely agree. What advice would you give to a parent that is concerned for their daughter who is now living thousands of miles away? So, what advice could you give to the parent to deal with the absence of their child?
I mean, that's a tough one. I personally lived overseas, for off and on for 5 years, and I was out of college by that point, so, and I saw how tough it was on my parents and my family. And, it is tough. I think that you just got to trust that when you pick that school, that they're in a good situation. They're in, they have a coaching staff and support system at their new school that's going to take care of them. Obviously, technology is an awesome feature that we have these days where, you can FaceTime and Zoom and communicate in ways that you never used to be able to. So I do think that helps. But in terms of giving advice to a parent, I don't know that I could do that. Like I said, it's not easy, but you want to, when you make that decision, do your research and make sure that your kid is going to have a good support system. And then from there, you just got to have a little bit of trust and faith that they're going to make it through those bumps. They're going to make it through those tough days, and it's ultimately going to make them a stronger person.
I like that. Second to last question, Coach. And this is probably for me, the most important social question, is, seeing these young women come in to your program at 18, 19, You know, they're away from their friends, families, whether they're international or domestic. As we've already alluded to, there's a bunch of distractions. So we're talking about drugs, we're talking about alcohol, we're talking about, you know, sexual relations. What's your advice, you know, to these young women and young men that are coming in and they're having to face these distractions?
Yeah, my biggest piece of advice is to just keep your priorities in check. You want balance in your life. You want to work hard and you want to have fun as well, but keep your priorities in check. And like I said, so if you have those in order, then you know that your extra time needs to go here, and here first. And then when it comes to those distractions, you know, just be smart about it. Obviously, you want to have a social life. You want to, you know, if you grew up in an area where you drank alcohol with your family, you want to do that. You want to have that release. That's fine, but you just have to be smart about it. You have to understand when is the right time. You have to understand your surroundings. You know, for females especially, I would say, especially their first year, don't go anywhere alone. You know, always have a friend with you, a teammate with you. You know, don't take any silly risks where you don't know who's in your surroundings, you don't know where you're at, you don't know how you're getting home. You know, silly things like that. You know, our specific campus is kind of on the side of a mountain, so we don't have a lot of cities like right next to us that can get the kids into too much trouble. But obviously, you know, trouble will find you anywhere.
Everywhere, yeah.
I think the one you touched on, relationships, is a tough one this day and age. You know, social media makes it worse. Snapchat makes it worse. You know, if I snap that I'm here and then there's this girl and I'm supposed to be dating you, now the kid has their feelings hurt. I mean, I always say I can't imagine being a college athlete this day and age. I think it's very difficult with the pressures that they have. So I just think if you keep your priorities straight, you stay focused. Sure, you want balance in your life, but just be smart about it. You know, be smart about the fun that you're having, and always know who you're with, where you're going, how you're getting home, all those silly details like that.
Okay, appreciate it. Sounds like some real good advice. Coach, it's been amazing having you on, and thank you very much for giving up your time to impart your wisdom with us. It's been great having you on, and thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I had a blast. My name is Maria Marchesano. I'm the head women's basketball coach. We appreciate you watching the Eurostepping, and just keep working hard. Work hard and stay humble. Appreciate you watching the Eurostepping.
I want to thank everybody for watching Eurostepping.
Watching the Eurostepping.
The Eurostepping.
The Eurostepping.
You've been watching the Eurostepping.
The Eurostepping.
Eurostepping.
You've been watching the Eurostepping, a great podcast show hosted by Coach D.